Today we are looking on another Fujifilm camera, and it's another old one. I don't think anyone missed out that I have a thing going on for the older Fujifilm cameras, and I'm running this episode called Fujifilm X-Series Old is Gold. And today we are traveling a little bit forward in the time compared to where we was last time when we were looking on the X Pro 1. Today we are looking on the X-T1, and this camera was released back in 2014 and was considered to be one of Fujifilm's flagship models. Fun thing with this camera is that it's made in Japan. Later down the road, Fujifilm moved manufacturing of the X-T series to China. And some people claimed that these old ones have a much higher quality than the newer one. And I kind of tend to agree. These houses just tend to feel very solid and very good in the hand. However, there is some compromises working with this camera, as there is with most older cameras. But there was also, back in the days when this was a new high-end camera, there was some critics about this camera. So let's just start to get those critics out of the hand. Well, first of all, the buttons, they doesn't stick out so much. So I've seen a lot of hacks on the internet where people are increasing the bumps on the buttons in many ways, like using epoxy and things like that. And it feels like Fujifilm were listening to that critics because they fixed this issue on the later models. Another thing though that is nice with this camera and the old one is the exposure compensation dial, which is this dial up here. And what Fujifilm did with this dial, or how it was designed on these models, was a very nice design because it's easy to reach it with the thumb, and that's something that they got rid of on the newer models. The X Pro line, however, still has this design, and it's really easy to just move around with the thumb, but the X-T series isn't. There's another weird thing on the ISO dial. It has this little button here, and this button is not really like locking it, so you need to push it down in order to change your ISO, and that prevents you from moving the ISO just extremely quick. Later down the road, they implemented it to be a lock dial, so if you push it down, you lock it, and if you push it down another time, you unlock it. And that means you can move it very fast, which you couldn't on this one. Besides those things, which are just minor things, this is a really good camera. This is the camera where Fujifilm introduced face detection. The previous models, which has the first X-Trans sensor, they only had contrast-based autofocus, which was not so reliable in many situations. And this one with the face detection, it's a big leap forward when it comes to autofocus performance. It's not, however, as good as modern cameras, but it's good. It's nothing I really complain about. This was also one of the first cameras that has the face detection introduced, which is a feature that I appreciate a lot when I'm working with autofocus, and that face detection works very well. In many ways, you kind of, if you compare it to the X Pro 1 and the older generation sensors, you're kind of getting a much better camera for significantly less money, actually. I, however, made a ridiculously good deal on this camera. I paid only $100 for it. Yeah, you heard right, $100. That is, as I've said, ridiculously cheap, but it proves that it's possible to get them for that little money. However, a more realistic price is between $200 and $400 for the house, depending on the condition of the house. The condition of my house was, well, not the best, so to say. this rubber piece around the eye. It was a wobbly. There was also some loose rubber on it. But after some minutes with some glue and ordering a new back piece here for $10 or so, this house is feeling just as new. Well, not really, but it feels good. It's in a good condition. When it comes to Fujifilm sensors, there's a lot of discussions which one is the best. This one has the X-Trans 2, which is a 16 megapixel sensor, and compared to the X-Trans 1, which is also a 16 megapixel sensor, some people will say they are pretty similar. I'm not sure, to be honest. Never done a side-by-side comparison, not yet at least, but my impression, however, is that the X-Trans 1 is the best sensor, and the second best is the X-Trans 4 sensor. Hello there, this is me from the future. A small disclaimer here. When this was recorded, I didn't own an X-Trans 5 sensor. I do that now, and the X-Trans 5 sensor had become possibly my all-time favorite Fujifilm sensor, or at least my second favorite after the original X-Trans sensor. However, that is extremely subjective, and I know a lot of people who say that the X-Trans 3 is better than X-Trans 4. I know a lot of people who say that X-Trans 2 is the best, and it goes on and on. However, the conclusion we can come up with is that, like all Fujifilm cameras, the colors and the color reproduction you get out of these cameras, they are just amazing. This one has the film simulations, lacking some of the newer ones like classic negative, but I've done a video where I changed the metadata of this file into a newer camera in order to unlock all of those film simulations in the raw developer, and that works. It works good. I have nothing to complain about when doing that. It gives me the look, and it gives me a very good starting point to achieve the kind of look I want. Link to that video will be in the description. Some other things that could be pretty nice with this camera is that Wi-Fi was introduced in this camera, so you could kind of like get the picture you want directly to your cell phone and upload to social media. Other cons could be for some people that it just have one card slot. Personally, I couldn't care less. Same goes for IBIS. Some people would say, oh, it doesn't have IBIS. Well, honestly, it's not a big deal either. IBIS is nothing that you really need for photography. Compared to newer cameras, the affordability of this camera is amazing, so to say. It's a 16 megapixel sensor, and that's all the resolution you need, and even more. You could do almost everything with this camera and out of the resolution you have. And considering the price where you could pick this camera up for and get a lens, I would say if you're extremely lucky like me, you could get a camera and a Fuji 35mm f2 lens for $300, $400, and that, my friends, is a lot of value for the money. When it comes to the size, this is a camera you should pick up or use if you appreciate a compact camera, which is small in size yet has that premium quality and that premium feel when you're holding it in the hand. This is a weather sealed house. It's made in Japan. It's very solid, and it feels like, well, if you drop it, not much gonna happen to it. Same goes if you go out and shoot in heavy rain and things like that. Nothing gonna happen to it. So to summarize this up, this is a cheap 16 megapixel camera with a lot of value for your money. It has that Fujifilm reproduction of the colors, Fuji colors, the Fuji delicious color, call it whatever you want. It's a very good camera. Perhaps it lacks some of that magic that you get in the first X-Trans sensor. However, that might be a myth. And that is something that we're gonna put to the test later down the road, because now I actually own a Fuji camera that has an X-Trans 1, 2, 3 and 4 sensor. Hello there, this is me from the future again. As previously mentioned, I have an X-Trans 5 sensor. So that upcoming video is gonna be a comparison between the X-Trans 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Perhaps even the stacked one, if I'm able to get my hands on that one. So be prepared for a video coming up where we compare all the sensors to once and for all come up with a decision on which Fujifilm sensor is the best. Of course, when you're picking up an old camera, there is compromises, but I kind of feel like the compromises are not so relevant when it comes to truly doing photography. When it comes to doing film and shooting film, well, I wouldn't say this is the best option. However, it can record film, does sit in full HD, but this is not a camera I would consider to shooting film with. For that purpose, there's better cameras, but overall, this camera is a solid camera. There's not much I could complain about. I wouldn't mind to bring this to a professional shoot and use it for a professional shoot. It works good with manual lenses because you could customize the focus peaking in ways that you can't with the older ones. You could have like different colors and things like that, which you couldn't have on the older ones. So this is perhaps the second best camera you can get for the value when we are talking about Fujifilm cameras. I believe that the best value for the money when it comes to Fujifilm is the X-T3. However, that's not what we're going to discuss now, but I just want to mention it. So to conclude all, the X-T1 is still a camera that holds up even now in 2023, and it's probably going to hold up for many years to come, because old cameras, when they reached that threshold where cameras became good enough, it's not like they're gonna get worse or deteriorate over time. The only thing that's gonna happen with this camera is maybe it breaks, but as long as it works, it's still gonna do good pictures. It's gonna do as good pictures as it did back in 2014, 10 years from now. And the way we're like observing images today makes the whole discussion about high resolution even more obsolete than it was when this camera was new. Because when this camera was new, we were not publishing images as much on Instagram and social medias as we're doing now. Every single images we are watching at, or most of the images we are looking at in our daily feeds, are low resolution images, way under the 16 megapixel that this camera provides. And even if you want to print it, it's possible to print 16 megapixel big. They've done it before when this was new, and they do it all today as well. So no big issues with the resolution. And third time here, I'm from the future again. I realized that I forgot to record an ending for this video, but anyway, this little marvel of a camera, the X-T1, it's definitely worth picking up, and it's a really cheap camera, but it holds a very high value. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more of it, there's a playlist here where you have all the Fujifilm old is gold playlist and videos that I've done, and you can click here to subscribe. Thanks for watching. I see you later.